that you saw either yourselves or some people you know in those photos, and I think that you can't get that many photos with that many people unless you're a well-loved person, and that was Tim. So thank you all for being here to watch that and enjoy it, and thanks for those two who put it on. So now we're going to open the floor up to people who want to come up and say some things about Tim. And I hope I learned some new things about Tim today, really. And some dirt, too, maybe. You never know what's out there. But I'm going to ask people to be a little bit judicious with their time, if you don't mind. I hope a lot of people want to come up and say something, but we can all be here all night, as we know, because there's a lot of things to say about Tim. And we're going to start off with my sister Molly, who's going to say the first words about Tim.
I certainly think it's been a really lovely day and a lot of people that have gathered to honor Tim, and I'm really grateful for that, and I'm sure that that would make him super happy. Just quickly, I mean, in talking to everybody here today, it's just a series of, he was just the kindest person, just always kind. I don't think there was anyone he ever spoke to that didn't walk away from him thinking that he was just so nice. And it was genuine. And it was just a gift that he had with anybody that he ran into. Anywhere. A stranger, a friend, a family. Anything that you needed from Tim, you could rely on him. But he kind of popped up in some funny areas sometimes that were unexpected. And I do remember there was I think it was Christmas Eve. I had kind of a formal meeting happening in my living room with a group of people. And my kids had just come home from school. I think they were in college. And I think I kind of wondered, but hadn't talked to anybody about how am I going to do Christmas, you know, this year for my boys. And a knock came to the door, and he stepped in. And he had all these presents that he had just gone out and bought and wrapped. And he just kept bringing them in and putting them by the fireplace. And all the people around were just kind of like, what is happening here? And I said, that's my brother. And it was just such a Tim moment. And I stood up and I hugged him and we wished Merry Christmas, knowing that we would see each other the next day. But he wanted my kids to have gifts from him. And he left as quickly as he came. And everybody sitting there was like, I think we just saw an angel. And that's just how it always felt with Tim. Just always felt like that. And I'm so grateful for everybody being here today. And I hope that everybody's had a really nice time honoring his memory. So, thank you.
Jim Stevens coming up. That's one story I've never heard before, and that one made me cry. So, that was great.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. Eddie, if I get long-winded and you go like this, I'll know I only have 10 minutes left, okay? Yeah, I've been doing public speaking for 34 years, and I don't know if I can put two sentences together right now, so bear with me. There's absolutely no way to put it into words the impact that Tim's life has had on me and all of us here. And when I think of Tim, it was so fun to see the slideshow. I didn't really want the slideshow to end. But Johnny, where are you, Johnny? I just thought he knocked it out of the park with some of these things. I was going to mentioned, things we remember about Tim. There you go. Like his white sweatpants, but you added, it probably had holes in it, right? And then the orange puffy vest, which was and the ever so tight blue dolphin swim shorts. And one time we were coming out of the water, I go, Tim, and he goes, hey, just gotta be proud, man. I'll never forget the Volkswagen Bug with the off-colored fender, right? And the nicknames, Eddie and I were, I think you had literally, no jokes, 6, 7, 8 nicknames. And for some reason I was James Dean, I don't know where that came from. Big Daddy and stuff. Farrell, yeah, I know that. And then Tim's infectious laugh. I just loved how his voice would get higher and higher. He'd try to keep time to it. Like someone said this morning, at the end there's a couple of claps. Tim helped me with my love of nature. From body surfing down at the hole, watching dolphins go by, cheering each other on when a big old left came rolling through, watching the pelicans in the formation, as Johnny was talking about this morning. Heading up to the halfway house, which is also known as Raymond's Kitchen. And the sandwich line would start, and here comes out the powdered milk I think we put out. And fishing in Mammoth together. Just being interested in just as much in nature as the fish we were catching. Tim and Mimi, I think Mimi, you're on this one too, but they gave me my love for country music. There we go, come on girls. And we spent a lot of time playing guitars, and I helped him with the ukulele a little bit. That was a lot of fun for me. And then I know you'd all agree with this, but I just feel like Tim is all of our biggest cheerleader. It's something my wife kind of came up with that term. Super supportive on the big things, the little things. Constantly just investing himself with deeper questions. And he and I didn't even agree with everything, but it didn't matter. We had a friendship that was really solid. This is really special. I could go on, but I do want to be sensitive. Do you want to go to Kings Canyon? Sure, good. All right. So one time we went up to Kings Canyon. I think it was like to see the sequoias or something when he was up in Visalia. And Tim and I we had our Pumpmaster 760 BB guns. And we were hitting targets that we thought we were pretty good, but basically we were shooting downhill about 40 yards away into a pond that was about 100 yards. But every time we hit the water, we thought we were doing something. And we were so focused on that, we didn't realize that we were in a national forest and a park ranger pulled up. And I heard him say, "Put down your weapons." And I put mine right down, but Tim, for some reason, he took his little Pumpmaster 760 and just put it behind his leg like this. Well, the ranger proceeded to pull on us. And all of a sudden, it was like magic, like gravity. You hear this little gun go. And all the way home, we were laughing super hard about this. My wife was like, "You guys realize you had a gun pulled on you?" And we were like, "Yeah, but it was funny the way the gun was." I was changing the tone here a little bit. I was really thankful for, towards the end of his life, that Val and I were able to have some really good and powerful heart-to-heart talks with him about eternity, God's grace, the sufficiency of Christ's death and resurrection, that our salvation is not based on performance or works, but by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ. And a few weeks ago, I shared these lyrics with Tim, 12 days ago. And it's from a band called Third Day, if you've heard of them. And Tim thought this song meant a lot to him. What are you going to do when your time has come and your life is done and there's nothing you can stand on? What will you have to say at the judgment throne? I already know the only thing that I can say is, I trust in Jesus, my great deliverer, my strong defender, the Son of God. I trust in Jesus, blessed Redeemer, my Lord forever, the Holy One. I was blessed that Tim was comforted by these words and these truths there at the end. And I'm going to miss this guy. There's no replacing Tim Perry. I'm just just thankful to be part of this, Eddie. I appreciate the chance to play song last night and be involved with the family. It's very special to me. Thanks.
It was beautiful last night. Thank you, Jim. You were there last night. You got to see Jim and Val play at the Vigil. It was beautiful. So thank you, Jim, and thank you, Val. I know there's some other folks that want to come up here, and I guess I could go around the room if you're shy and don't want to come up here and get on the stage, but anyone that wants to come on up and say a few words, okay, all right.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Disa, and I'm coming from a work perspective from Tim, since I was his manager for 32 years. I met Tim in January of 1991, and I was just a new manager at the time, trying to supervise the Western region with Permabound. Tim was already on board with us for the previous year, and he was working with his dad, of course. And Ed and Tim had a really large territory. They went from Los Angeles to through Bakersfield, Fresno, Madera, all the way up to Merced, Central California, and a big area to cover. So one of the first things we decided to do was add another perk, and that was John Perk. So 9 months later, John joined the team. So we've got 3 perk boys. Fortunately, that was kind of a challenging time. Things weren't really going that great. Not a lot of money around. So we had to figure out a plan, and that was to go after to get a larger market share from our competitors. So that was our plan. That's what we were going to do. That really meant a lot of hard work, school to school, door to door, and all these customers learned very quickly what to expect from our gifted perk team. Ed, of course, was already very accomplished, legendary really for Permabound, and it didn't take very long for the 2 boys to follow suit. They made many good friends, lots of new customers along the way, and their stellar reputation continues right until this day. 13 years later, another perk joined the team. So Ann came along in 2004 and really was a star in her own right. Love Ann. And actually, I love working with all the perks. And each had a really different, unique perspective on how to tackle selling books. But Tim was the leader of the gang. He was always trying to figure out new ways to help his customers. He loved to ask questions. Lots of questions. He really got to know his clients well. He got to know me well. He was asking me questions all the time. But he was always well prepared, kept his focus on his customers' needs, and he was also the go-to guy within our region. When any of our other reps had a question or needed a suggestion on how to handle a difficult situation, Tim was the go-to guy, because he'd probably already been there and figured it out. I had one rep decades ago who commented to me one day that Tim could sell anything to anybody. How true. He was talented, he was very gifted. He was honest, ethical, principled, dependable, and wise. And it wasn't just focused on the moment. Tim had a larger plan in mind. He wanted to make sure that the decisions he was making would not only help him in the present, but in the future as well. Not long after his dad passed, we attended a meeting of a newly formed group called the We Love California Authors and Illustrators. It was the brainchild of the Los Angeles Unified School District librarian who wanted to bring students together with talented children's authors and illustrators. In preparation for the meeting, the LA teachers and the librarians and the students entered a contest of sorts by putting together a presentation with the goal of winning a collection of autographed books along with an in-school visit from a prominent California California author. The grand prize, that is, the author visit along with a good book collection, was named the Ed Pert Award to honor Ed's contribution to students' love of reading. Well, Tim was asked to speak that day to a large group of these librarians, authors, and illustrators that were present. I know some of you were there too. And as he began to talk about Ed and the award named after him, Tim brought tears to my eyes as well as to many in the room that day, when he said that his dad was the greatest man he had ever known. Tim went on to list all the wonderful virtues and qualities that his dad possessed. Tim clearly listened and learned from his wonderful family. And now, decades later, I can attest to the fact that Tim made his dad very, very proud. Tim was one of the greatest men I had ever known. I am so blessed all these years to call him not only my awesome rep, but more importantly, my awesome friend. Thank you.
Zane, you going to introduce yourself? All right, thank you. Thank you, John.
Hello, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Zane Purr. I'm one of Tim's nephews. I'm going to be sharing a message today on behalf of somebody that was very important in Tim's life who's not able to be here. His name is Charlie Jennison, and he met Tim at Holy Trinity, the church that we were just at. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And you'll learn a little bit about him throughout this message. So he says, "Hello, everyone. I'm sad that I can't be there today in person to honor Tim, a person that I love, a person that I respect, and a person that is a role model to me on how to live my life. Today, I'm graduating from high school, and I know Tim is smiling down with the biggest grin on his face. Probably the same grin he showed me when I asked him to be my confirmation sponsor a few years ago. I met Tim when I was about 8 years old at Holy Trinity, where we both went to church. One of the things I remember about church back then was the donuts we got after Mass. During that time, when all the adults were talking to each other, Tim would always find his way to me and ask me how I was doing. I remember feeling important because an adult was actually taking the time to talk to me. When I wanted to become an usher, guess who offered to go to the training with me? Tim didn't need any training, but he was a natural at greeting people, and he still went with me and made sure I understood what I needed to do. And then he would always wait and see which masses I signed up for so he could sign up for the same ones. That's how me and Tim became friends. So when I needed to choose a confirmation sponsor, even though I have uncles and cousins that could have done it, I asked Tim because he was the one that I saw the most faith in. He's the one I wanted to be like. He's the one I saw Jesus in the most. It was during COVID that I asked Tim if he would be my confirmation sponsor, and so I had to do it over FaceTime. I was so nervous, but as soon as I saw his big smile and heard his perfect laugh, I knew he loved me like I loved him, and all my anxiety went away. 2 days later, he called me to tell me that he had already watched a documentary on the saint that I had picked, and my saint's name. Who does that? Sorry, Tim, I haven't taken your advice on watching that documentary yet. I have taken all of your other advice. Thanks for teaching me that God is always with us. But it's up to us to listen for Him and to Him with open ears and an open mind. You told me that the closer the relationship I have with God, the better life is. You taught me about the gifts we get from God, like mercy, forgiveness, compassion, empathy, and hope. And thank you for all the conversations and for teaching me so much about what it takes to be a good friend. My confirmation saint is Saint Philip Neri. One of his most famous quotes is, "Cheerfulness strengthens the heart and makes us persevere in a good life. Therefore, the servant of God ought always to be in good spirits." It's clear to me that Tim Pert was a really good servant of God because he was always in good spirits, even in the last few conversations I had with him. The definition of a difference maker is a dedicated person who can make a big impact with just a few small actions or words. Someone who improves the lives of others, one who rallies or encourages others to propel themselves forward and bring about change. Pam, I want you to know that your husband is a difference maker. He made a huge impact on my life, and I will always remember him and all the lessons he taught me about saying yes to faith. I want to make him proud of me, and if I'm lucky, I'll master his laugh because he really did have the best laugh of anyone I know. Thank you for listening.
So I'll be short and sweet. My name is Tim Marshall. I'm the youngest of the 7 Marshalls, which pales in comparison to the 9 Perks, our cousins. So my mom, Rosemary, was siblings with Uncle Ed. So that's our connection. So I'm here with my sister Pert representing the Marshall clan. So if I know anything about the Perks and the Marshalls, we like to have our beverages. So I wanted to just propose a quick toast and salute to Tim and a life well lived. And we love the Perks and everybody, and thanks for the hospitality. Happy to represent our family.
I'm scared. I know several of you, but not everybody. My name is John Carlson. I first met the Pert family in 1983 via Eddie. We went to Humboldt State together. And I had never been introduced to a family like this ever. And I can honestly say I love them all. Everybody in the family. I've gotten to know everybody over the last 40 years. I hate to even say that out loud. 40 years. But Tim was special, and I have known Tim for 40 years as Sleem. And I haven't heard anybody mention that name yet. But Sleem has, he's been an anchor for 40 years. I call it, well, Eddie, and then John is weed. I've been talking about weed forever. And my kids are like, dude, are you a dope dealer? Whenever I talk about weed. But I love them all. And I was introduced to that was the first big family I'd ever really been around. And when we would come home for the holidays, Ed and I from Humboldt, I was fortunate enough to join them for big meals at Christmas time or Easter on occasion. And I'd never forget those days. And Mr. Pert, when he asked me to roll an ear of corn for him, I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. It was on a big stick of butter, and my family was too prim and proper for that. My mother would never go for that. I couldn't believe it. So now my family, my kids and my wife, we all roll butter because they're roller. But one thing I learned from the Pert family, especially Weed and Sleem and Eddie, we were on a road trip early on. We were up near Santa Barbara, and we ordered an extra large pizza. And this story is time honored now, Ed knows. And I grew up with only 2 siblings. I never had to have combat eating in a family. So we sit down to this extra large pizza, which looked awesome. And I take one piece, and I'm nibbling away. I go for a second piece, and it's gone. The whole thing is gone. And that was in a few minutes. I couldn't believe it. So the next year we're all out together, the 3 of us again. And Ed won't forget this one. Pizza gets put on the table. I grab 4 pieces immediately. Quick learner. Yeah. I've never seen people who can eat pizza so fast. All 3 of those guys. All 3 of them. Anyway, for the last, this year will be our 34th year of going to Crowley Lake as a group of friends. In the very first year, it was Eddie, we, myself, Robert McNabb was here, and a friend of ours, Neil Mangy. That was the original 5. Over that 34 years, Sleem started coming. He covered at least 30 years of that. So I knew year in and year out because I live in Northern California, I would see him at a minimum once a year. And on those trips, Sleem was what everybody said about his laughter, what everybody said about his good-naturedness, but also every time I saw him, Big Daddy, I heard somebody say that, Big Daddy, how's it going? You know, that was, and on the water, he was always so mellow and so just into being there. And I swear he caught some of the biggest fish of all was because he would just hang out near the shore and just go easy, and I couldn't believe the fish he was catching. But we're going to miss him, and this year at Crowley for sure, it's going to be a sad one without Timmy there. We know that he's not coming back. We're going to honor him for sure. A nickname that I've had for 40 years with the family, well, most of the family, including Mrs. Pert and Mr. Pert, just called me Carlson for 40 years. But a buddy of ours, McNabb, who's here, nicknamed me Carlsberg early on. I think after the beer, but I'm not sure. And so for at least 35 years, Timmy, Sling, he was the only one who pronounced it this way. Carlsberg! He had the high-pitched berg to it every time. And I was lucky enough to talk to him about 3 months ago. And we had a really, really nice talk on the phone. But the Carlsberg came out. So anyway, I just want to raise a toast also to Timmy, and we're never going to forget him. Never.
My name is Sheila, and two of the most joyful and special days of my life were spent with Tim. I was introduced to the plethora of Perts in 2000 when Kirsten asked me to be the oldest living maid of honor at her wedding. And Timbo was his best man, and Eddie was too. And I had only met John a few times, but I thought there could not be anybody as nice as John. And then I met Tim. And then I met Mike and Mimi. But Tim took time to introduce me to everybody so that I could know who everybody was. He made graphs and charts so I could figure out. And he took the time to make me part of the family. And at the reception that day, just as John did this morning, John spoke from his heart about Tim, and Tim made a toast at the wedding and spoke from his heart, as did Eddie. And they had such a history together, and I thought, oh yeah, I gotta follow this. I mean, it was not gonna be easy, but they kind of set a standard for heartfelt speeches that day. And fast forward 4 years, Tim and I were asked to be godparents to Zane. And that was another incredibly joyful day. And after that, Tim and I would see each other at Zane's birthday parties. We'd help build houses and plant plants and ride trains. And he was just such a kind and compassionate and caring person. And you think there had to be a foundation somewhere that started with Raina. And as the father mentioned this morning, she was an influencer, and she influenced him and laid that foundation for him with faith and love and discipline and joy. And then Pam came along and built onto that. So thank you both for sharing Tim with us. And I know he said he was worried about his mom and about Pam. And I wrote to him and told him that we'd do whatever we could to help them. But please don't make me pull weeds. Anything else? Tim, thank you, and thank you for allowing us to be part of your family.
Hi, I am Colleen Breitnauer. I'm Timbo's cousin, one of the Westfalls. So, sorry. Anyway, gosh, we used to come over here every summer, and it was just a lot. I mean, there was a lot of Perts, a lot of Westfalls, and I'm not kidding, our parents were strict, so you could not go to the beach without doing your chores. Even if we weren't at our own home, we still had chores to do. We still had to do our chores at the Pert house before we could go to the beach. So we got up and we did our chores. went to the beach. And we did things as a group. And as one of the younger kids, when we were young, we went to T Street. And that was, you go down Barcelona, go to T Street, go to the beach. Well, 8th grade comes, and you get to move to the hole. Which is a big deal. So, 8th grade comes, you're like, oh, this is the summer, I'm going to the hole. So, it's like a huge thing. So, we go down there, we're nervous. It's our first year at the hole. We went down there, and, all the older kids, they go there. They were so nice. We thought they would be like, oh, you can't be here, whatever. And Timbo, Eddie, Molly, they're all there, and they were nice and coming, wearing bathing suits up to here. And things were different in the 80s. I mean, whatever. But it was the memories there. It was just, you went morning, you came home, and I don't know how many peanut butter jellies you ate during the day, but you came home starving. We'd get home and, the showers outside. We had to take the showers in the driveway. Couldn't have sand in the house. Although I'm not, the hose, no showers, but I'm not sure I ever slept in sheets that weren't sandy. But they had, oh my gosh, the memories with the Westfalls and the Perts, and we wouldn't see each other the whole year. And the minute that we got together, we were exactly as we were the day we left. I mean, it's like no time had passed. But Tim was, yes, he was always very nice to us, even though I thought we were like all the same age. I mean, they were the big kids, we were little kids, but we all ran around in a pack. We really did. But one thing I do remember is, we are all excellent swimmers. Our parents wouldn't have it any other way, but, you get down at the hole, and they didn't, always have a lifeguard down there. And, there's twice, 2 riptides twice. Molly, where are you? Molly saved me once. Tim saved me the second time. They're like, listen, swim sideways. Okay, I got it. So, anyway, we just have, all these years we spent growing up here. I got married. I had we had our own kids. And, 4 kids every single year. Another kid, we came here. Tim treated our kids just like he treated all the, Pert kids, Griffin kids, Allen kids, they were just one big group, and he immediately included them, got to know them. They felt as close to Timbo as we did, and that was just Timbo. He just did that. He just did. So anyway, just growing up with him and, calling him, we're going to Pedro's, you coming down? Yes, I got a chair. I'm like, okay. So anyway, the memories of him, they'll never go away. We're going to cherish him forever, and he definitely was something special. So thanks, guys.
So I guess one advantage to being moderator is I get to get up here and throw in a few details about some things that happened. And the first one I want to do is Carlson, because I remember well that story that he told about pizza. And I remember it was a year later that we had not had pizza together with Carlson. And we were at this restaurant, we got another pizza, and we get the pizza, and Carlson grabs his 4 pieces, and we're like, dude, what are you doing? He said, well, I remember what happened last time. It ain't gonna happen again, right? So yeah, he's a quick learner sometimes. And all the stories about the Westfalls, and for those of you that don't know, the Westfalls have 19 kids, and we just got to hang out with the younger ones, because my mom is 10 years younger than their mom and their sisters, and so we had the best time living in Phoenix while we did, and then every year they came over. And I remember we were kids, and they were driving over from Phoenix, And we would literally wait up at the top of Barcelona, like for hours for them to get there. And then we'd run down the street, they're here, they're here. I mean, we would just sit up at the corner of the night waiting for the bus to get there. And I remember, let's see, when Colleen said, I never slept in a bed that wasn't sandy, it reminded me of in the summers, I would not get out of my trunks except for either Saturday night or Sunday when we went to church. That was the only long pants we were in all summer long. And yes, our beds were sandy, and I thought that was normal. I remember I was like, Heather, my wife, our bed was a little bit dirty, and I'm like, what's the problem? She had to clean it up a little bit. One more story I want to tell about the summers in San Clemente with the Westfalls is one of my favorites is Molly and Rocco. Rocco over there was Tim's age, and there were, I don't know, lots of kids around, and one day Molly and Rocco decided to lock the rest of us out of my mom's house and eat ice cream in the front window in the front of the house. And we're slamming on the door, they were laughing at us and mocking us from inside the big window. Yeah, they got in trouble for that. We told on them. In any event, I appreciate getting to remind you all of a few memories that I have of those great times. Maybe it sounds like my sister Mimi wants to come up with things.
I'm Mimi. I'm Tim's sister number 7 of the family. I wasn't actually planning on getting up here to speak, but when I was sitting back there listening, I thought, of all the places that we've ended up to have this reception, I thought I would like to just share something, because there's probably a third of the people in this room, you all know who are some of the best friends that Tim and I have to this day still. And it's because of the Presbyterian Church. There's Doris Stevens, Jim's mom. Doris and her husband was pastor here for, what was it, 22, 30 years? How many years? Okay, almost 20 years he was pastor, and it was all our years growing up. And Timbo and I were the 2 out of our family that came to this church, because the Catholic Church, of course, had the worst youth group, and it was so boring, and we had to go. And we're like, oh, that sucks. And we had heard that it was really fun at the Presbyterian Church. Give it a try. So we ended up both being a part of this church. We were very welcomed in, except for the one time this old man was walking downstairs on Sunday, and we'd go to the 8 o'clock Mass at Fatima, because Mom was afraid we were going to be converts and leave the Catholic Church. She said you can go from 8 to 9 at Fatima, and then you can go down there. So then from 9 to 12 we'd be here on Sundays. And it was like the best 3 hours of the week. But one day, thank God I had been here a few years, I was walking downstairs, and this one man says, aren't you that Catholic girl that goes here? And I'm like, proud. He's like, well, do you know you're going to hell, blah, blah, blah. And he starts going off, and I'm like, excuse me? And I thought, if I had been new here, I would have never come back. But thank God for all of Jim, all our friends, our whole crew that's out there. There's a whole bunch of you. And the fact that I had gotten to be here already and built such an incredible faith because of this church and the people here and the way that they taught us to have it be a personal faith that we didn't know at the time before, and share memories. We went on camping trip. I know Rob and Ann were on some of those trips up north. Bev went to some of them. John and Eddie, they were at Cox, and we did all this stuff with this church for so many years. And sitting here thinking, when in fact it was, many of you know Bernadette Pasquale, when Pam was trying to come up with, where are we going to do this, reception? What are we going to do? We were checking all these places, and they didn't hold enough people, and blah, blah, blah. And she just couldn't decide. We had called a couple, and they weren't going to work. And the next thing I know, I had called Bernadette, and I hadn't talked to her in a couple months, and I was telling her about it, and she goes, we were checking all these places in town, and we were checking Catholic church venues, and she goes, well, what about the Presbyterian church? And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. That wasn't on our radar. So when I found out that we could have it here, I went to Pam, and I said, Pam, Bernadette thought of the Presbyterian church. I go, what do you think? And Bev was sitting there with me, and she just started crying. She goes, oh my gosh, that's what I've been praying for. That's what I've been wishing. I didn't even think of it. Because we got to have the Catholic Church for his service, and then to be here, because this place was such a huge part of Tim Pert. And all of you that love him, and all of you that are in San Juan know that. I mean, Jim, one of his besties in the whole world, and they just, like, when you get to have that at your core with these people in your life, and you know each other inside and out, you've been through everything together, you've been on the road singing in choirs and bringing Christ music to prisons and all these people everywhere in churches and sleeping on the floors, like more floor sleeping. So to us it wasn't weird, but to these other people that were fancy houses at this church, it was weird. We didn't care. We were hiding, when we went to the prison in Tehachapi, we were hiding behind Ron and Pondo and Jim Stevens, and we're like, oh my gosh. It was scary. We were like in this bad prison. We were young teenagers, and we're thinking, they're going to murder us. We're going to die. We're thinking, how did they let us come here? This is going to be so dangerous. They protected us all. We had to take off every ring, necklace. You had to put everything into these safes before we went in. But from the day we ever started here, it has been, this space has been such a beautiful home. I know for myself and Timbo in a really, really special way. And it is absolutely what helped my relationship with Tim get to be so close and special, because we were quite a few years apart. However, when you're here with the church and God and the group, just like Colleen said, it didn't matter what age you were all thrown in together. Some of them were 10 years older than us, some are 5 years younger, but we were all one group, and we moved in a group. We celebrated life. We prayed together. We did things for others. We had so much fun. We camped. We did everything you can imagine. And it was such a wonderful experience. So when I was just sitting back there thinking, I'm like, we need to all remember that this was such a dear, special place for Timbo, and that is why we ended up here. Big thank you, Bernadette, who, she ended up sick today, so she couldn't be here. She was so sad. But we would not be here without Bernadette suggesting it, and without all the history we have for this church, for Doris, for all of you and your people at this church. Doris, thank you for welcoming 2 little Catholics and our little brothers and sisters that came along with us to build such a special place in all of our hearts. So thank you.
Yeah, this is unscripted. I met Tim in 5th grade, and he was my first introduction to clan Pert. And he was quite an individual. When you first met him, he just had the vibes of somebody who wanted to be around. Very magnetic, I guess I could say. The one adjective I probably use to describe Tim is selfless. He was always thinking of others. And he'd be sick, and he'd be talking about, hey, how you doing? You know, just a selfless person, and I can tell he's made a big impact in all of our lives, just by all the people that are here today. And just wanted to come up and give him a send-off. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
I don't have any prepared things to say about my brother. In case you don't know me, I'm Mike Pert. I'm the oldest. And I can tell you that I'm going to miss him. There's a lot of things that came out today I've been listening to. And two of the things that really came out, and John Geezer brought this out, about my dad, about my sister Anne, about Tim, and Tim and Ann especially, you know, when I saw Ann at Stanford before she died, she looked at me, she said, in the end, it was only kindness. And those were her words of wisdom to me. And I asked her what rides to go on in Disneyland, she said, all the good ones. And you've heard a lot about kindness about Tim today. There's a lot of that runs through our family. Now, I wasn't the one that was on the end of a lot of that, being the oldest one. I'm sort of the bridge between the older Westfalls, a lot of them that are here, and the younger Westfalls and the younger Perks. And our lives were different. We lived very different lives in Phoenix before we moved here. But we sort of ran as a herd, if you can imagine. When we first lived in Phoenix, we lived 2 alleys over from the Westfalls. At the time, I think they had 16 kids and we had 8. And so we were always together. We were always running hard. We were always doing things. I mean, I'm the one that taught Eddie to fly fish, and he and my brother became 1,000 times better at it than I am ever going to be. You know, I got John involved in golfing, and I couldn't carry his jockstrap down the golf course. So, I mean, it was a great story about the young man who had his confirmation. Tim was responsible for his confirmation and his saint. And when I was this is typical of me as a young guy doing stuff and getting in trouble. When I was confirmed, I took my saint as Saint Robert, and the nuns found out that I took Saint Robert because of Bobby Orr. And they asked me, why in the hell would you take Bobby Orr as your confirmation sponsor? And I said, because he's like God to me. And I still have an argument with people about who's the greatest hockey player ever, and I know a guy that actually played with Gretzky, and I told him I thought it was Orr, and he goes, you got a really good argument for that. But anyway, the bond between the Westfalls, the Keeneys, the Gears, the O'Rourkes, ourselves, we all grew up together. The bond between the Griffin family and the Pert family goes back to the days when Randy was my buddy before he dated Peggy. And so this bond goes back to when we first moved over here, and I came over here, started playing baseball and football, got involved in things here in San Clemente, and I really had to change my life a lot because I was born in Texas, and then we moved to Alabama where a couple of my brothers and sisters were born, and then we lived most of my young life in Phoenix with my cousins and my friends, and we moved over here, and I was the new guy. And so I was sort of, as usual, I got to plow the ground for everybody that came behind me, which usually meant that I got in trouble, and they did. I think Rudy can tell you that. I mean, Dickie Westfall, I can tell you, he can get up here and tell stories about that for sure. Same with Toad and Terry and Mike, and unfortunately, a couple of them aren't here who were supposed to be here.
Mike, you deserve it.
It's probably true. I probably did deserve a lot of it, but that's just who I was. It's who I still am, unfortunately. But I wanted to thank all of you for coming. I know a lot of you have traveled a long way. My wife and I came from Colorado. Tim is a giant presence in everyone's life. He was so good to so many people, and he was so good to our nieces and nephews. And when my dad passed away, and I was supposed to be the guy that ran the trust and everything, I was living 2,000 miles away, and they called me up and asked me if Tim could take my spot. And so I said yes. Years later, Eddie informed me when we were trying to fix the trust that I was still actually on the hook as the fiduciary for the whole thing for all the years because I'd actually never been officially removed, which was terrifying. But anyway, he did so many great things. He took such good care of my mom. He stepped up, he took my place for all that stuff. You saw the whole thing with all the pictures, the stuff, the photos, all the things that he did for our nieces and nephews. I mean, my love of music really, in a lot of ways, came down from Nancy Westfall, through the Westfalls to me. And I've had a pretty great career playing music. And I have a big regret that I never got to play with Tim. I heard he was playing as a drummer, and I'm a bass player, and I'm a pretty good bass player. And I asked him several times, come on, let's play. Because, let's face it, if you're a bass player and you're playing with a good drummer, that's as good as it gets. It really is. I've played with some spectacular drummers, and it doesn't really matter if the rest of the band's good if you're playing with a great drummer. I mean, that's it. It's awesome. It's, you go away for a while and you're just happy. So I tried to get Tim to play, and he just never would. And he's like, well, I'm just horsing around, I'm just doing this, I'm just doing that. And I was talking to Molly a little while ago, and I said, and Molly said, well, that's because Tim didn't really want to play for real. And I said, well, I did want to play for real. And I did, and I still do. And, but I wanted to say, I want to thank all of you that are here. You obviously know so much about Tim. There's so many things that he did for this family, this extended family, the people that came. I told John, geez, I can't thank him enough for the things that he did for Molly, and for Ann, and for Tim during the time they were sick. I mean, they had some. There were some rough times with John where he stuck it out. I mean, my dad wasn't the nicest to John either, probably. But anyway, the kindness and the love and all the good things that came from Tim that flowed down through everybody that's in this room, through this family and everybody else. I think that, at this point, Nancy Westfall and I were talking about it, and, we talked about the fact that when we get to the end, when we're at this point, we don't want people to be sad. We don't want people to be crying. I don't want people to be, disappointed or whatever. I want people to be happy. I mean, I'm leaving money for a party. Nancy and I said we want there to be a party, we want there to be a band, we want there to be drinking, we want there to be a good time had by all. I can tell you that my daughter understands that my recessional, whether the church likes it or not, will be on my way to heaven by one live bet, which is a great rock gospel song that none of you have ever heard, because it's only on one album, but it is one of the greatest songs by Going Home ever. And I know my brother is at home, but I also know that he'd want us to be happy, and he'd want us to have a good time, and he would want us to enjoy each other's company and basically blow it out from here on out. We're a big Irish family. That's what we do. So please, from this moment forward, go forward, have fun, know that Tim's home, have faith, and be together. All I can tell you is, and I almost never cry. It's a huge loss to me. And he's going to leave a huge hole in my heart, because he was there for the good times and bad times with me. When we were little, it was me and Peggy and Tim. And I will miss him. But I know he's home. And I promise you from this moment forward, I'm going to stop crying. I'm going to be happy. There's going to be good music played. We're going to have a good time. The people who drink are going to drink. The people that don't drink are not going to drink. And those of us who do drink don't give a damn whether you do or not. Okay? But I want you to know, everybody in my family, everybody that showed up, the people that wanted to show up but couldn't show up, thank you for showing the love to Tim that he deserved. He was a good brother, he was a great person, and he was a good man. And in the end, what else can you say about somebody? Except that's the three things that probably you and he had great faith. If you can say those things about a person, they had a pretty good life. Thanks.
Rocco, no, you don't, Rocco. I'm before you.
I'm before both of you. So first, let me say I represent a new Irish clan here today, the Flynns. Old friends with Pam and Timbo, and it's spectacular to see the love flowing from all y'all to Tim. But I have to tell you about his darker side. Tim had an unholy love for dessert. And I have the perfect brownie recipe, the brownie recipe that gets you out of doing the dishes after dinner. That you know by heart that I had a version for everybody in the family. This one wants berries in the brownies. This one wants walnuts in the brownies. Like, I have a version of this recipe for everybody. And
Timbo would be at Pam and Mike's house, and she would be doing the dishes, and I would be making the brownies. And Tim would put too much ice cream on them, and so I knew it's not quite right yet. I have to keep going with something here. And he was good for no matter what kind of ice cream we had in the freezer. It was a couple scoops for it that he always seemed to need. Adapt, okay. Okay. And so I started asking him questions, pulling a Timbo on Timbo. So Timbo, what do you like about these? What do you not like about these? And finally, I realized they were too thin for him. Timbo needed the double wide version of the brownie. So we started perfecting the recipe, and Timbo, being the diligent guy, was honored to taste test and taste test and taste test until we finally got it right. And so now they will forever be, for me, the Timbo version of my brownie recipe. So I'll always see Timbo when I'm making those brownies, and I'll always think about his squeaky laugh that many of you also have, that is just such a joy to hear. And so for those of you that see him in the fly fishing or in those land yacht cruising things that he used to drive, those cars that just would take both sides of the driveway, or in kids' books, or in all the faces and the laughs of each other. For me, it will still always be the brownies for Timbo. So we'll have to excuse his love of dessert, maybe. Thanks.
Hi everybody, my name's Margie. I'm Pam's sister. So I met Tim shortly after Pam met Tim. We shared a couple of loves. Of course, the love of my sister. The love, okay, I can do this. The love of puzzling. Every Christmas, Tim and I exchanged puzzles, and I was super lucky at the very end that we were able to go on the back porch, back patio, and puzzle together, which was really lovely. Before Pam became a sewer, I was the sewer. So I would come down at Christmas time and Tim would go, Mark, can you fix these sweats? But we also had a love of sweats. Can you fix these sweats? And I'm like, no. There's no fabric left. It was all holes. He's like, well, can't you just sew them up? And I'm like, Tim, they're like this big. I can't sew them up like that. It's just not possible. So, and I don't know where John Pert is, but when I first met the Perts, his mom and I, we were at Thanksgiving, and we had, we were a small family, and we go into the Perts, and there's a lot. And so I spent the first 2 days with my eyebrows up here because there's a lot. And I couldn't figure out, and they all look alike. And I'm like, wait, which one are you? Right? I just couldn't. Don't start with me, because I'm still having issues with the twins. So when I got to know Tim better and he could loosen up, he told his story, and it had something to do with John Pert, and it had something to do with them out fishing. But he got so excited and jazzed up on his story that his voice started doing that thing way up here, and you couldn't actually understand him. It was something about they were fishing, and John, you dropped the fishing pole, and the fish took off with the fishing pole, and then he got another fishing pole, and he cast it, and then I lost the story. I think John caught the fish that he lost the fishing pole on, and so when he caught the fish, he caught his own fishing pole back. Is that it? Oh. So that last little bit with him and his laughter was just to the heart, right? It was just to the heart. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking care of each other in this hard time. And all the tears because he was so well loved. And that's for all of you.
Hi, I'm John. weed man. I'm just gonna tell you it's not what you think, okay? Never smoked weed in my life, actually. He's like, whoosh, one quick thing, whoosh, another quick thing. Whoosh. He's like, we good, Rudy? Rudy's like, no! And Tim's like, Rudy, we're good. We're like, Rudy's like, okay, we're good. He knew there was no stop. But anyway, it was just a hilarious moment with Tim. That was his fun-loving nature. And then the gift of gab, when Eddie came home from Santa Barbara after his freshman year in college, he needed a car badly. We had no money. Like, what are we going to do? So Eddie heard that you got to find a car with a slant six engine in it, right? Because they never quit running. So we start looking around and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're all looking around, figuring out what's for sale and how cheap we can get one and everything else. So one day, Tim and I get his bug. We start driving around town. And we're down by the golf course here on the south end of town. And we see this Plymouth Valiant sitting in the yard. And it's pretty ratty looking, right? It hasn't been driven in a while. And we knock on this guy's door, and he says, "Can I help you?" He's Tim's. Here goes Tim. Just starts calling. "Hey, how you doing? You know, we're looking for a car. Is that thing for sale? Like, what's the story on that thing?" Well, this guy proceeds to tell us that it's an ex-post office car. It's been driven X amount of miles, and Tim just keeps talking. And I'm just sitting there going, "Whoa," you know, talking. And then we just get in a nice conversation with this guy, and the guy looks back at us after about 20 or 30 minutes of talking, and he goes, "I'll tell you what, you guys seem like nice guys. If you can get that thing out of this yard, you can have it." He gave us a car! Tim convinced him to give us a car. We go home, we fire that thing up, poof! The thermostat blows out, we replace the thermostat, and that thing ran forever. Another cool part of this story about this is this car kind of stayed around for a while. I got a couple buddies here, and they remember the Valiant. We did donuts in that thing down the state park parking lot, and Eddie came home. He's like, "Dude, why is the battery off the plate?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Brad's like, "I know." Anyway. Yeah, we got the new headliner in Tijuana, new upholstery down there. It's looking pretty decent, right? So anyway, Tim moved up to the valley, to Visalia, and in true Tim fashion, this car sat around and got dirty, and his neighbors didn't like it a whole lot, right? Because he never drove it, and they were complaining about it. And then he heard this story about this woman who was a single mom, and she had a really sick child. And she had no way to get this kid to the doctor. Well, Tim decided to pay it forward. Gave her the car. So it was a beautiful moment. I just want to say also, this is great being here at the Presbyterian Church. I agree with Mimi. Tim made so many lifelong friends here. Boy, we had a lot of fun with people that went to this church down at the Hole when we were young. I see Dana and Ron there, all the Stevens and Para and Pondo and Ralph and Jackie. It was a whole crowd, right? But we were all down there having fun. Actually, I got one more funny story about that I guess I'll share. I was a little tyke, right? I was 8 years younger, and there was a woman in town, a woman to me. Her name was Gina Masaki. Some of you might know her. She was hot. And I'm out there boogie boarding, and it was getting to be the evening, okay? It's getting to be the evening. And I was the only one left in the water. I was out there, but I was probably, 12 years old, maybe. I was young, right? These guys are all on the beach. Well, Gina Masaki goes jogging by. And when she finishes, she comes out in the water. And she's right next to me. And she's like, whoop! Takes her top off, and she's splashing around. And I'm like, whoa! So I come in, and all these guys are sitting there, and they go, "Hey, John, how was it out there?" I'm like, "It was good." "Hey, did you see anything out there?" "No." Anyway, so I
laughs in September. We shared a lot of big barrels out there. But, you know, Tim was just so much fun, and those are a couple stories I just wanted to share about his fun side and the way he was such a giving man. So we're all going to miss him. This was beautiful. Thank you all for being here and celebrating him. I hope the stories continue because I'm loving every minute of it. But thank you.
Okay, I promise I'll be quick because I know I already went last night and got all my mushy stuff out. So this is just a funny story that Aunt Pammy wants me to share. So growing up, Claire, Louise, Sophie, myself, and our parents, we went to Holy Trinity and we got to see Aunt Pammy and Uncle Timbo almost every weekend at church. Donuts were a huge hit. That was a big highlight of the whole experience. But what I remember most specifically that I was laughing about in the days leading up to Uncle Timbo's passing was the way I used to look up to him, but in a very interesting, funny way. I thought it was really cool how he was allergic to incense and could leave Mass during the important parts outside. So I took it upon myself to try to pretend that I was allergic to incense. And would cough, and my parents were just like, Callie, quit it, like whatever. And it never got me anywhere, but it certainly made me laugh and us laugh in the last couple of days. So I just want to say, you know, love Uncle Timbo. He was everything good and wonderful, but he was also all the funny and fun things too. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Turner. I'm a neighbor. We're Kayak Marina friends. We go back with Tim and Pam for 30 years. We love them dearly. The more I drink, the more stories I can figure out that Tim and I have. We've been on Kayak Marina for 30 years, and Tim came down about 5 years into our stay, and he said, my name Bob, and he said, he always called me Bobby. He said, Bobby, we're going to go skateboarding. Tim had just acquired 2 of these long skateboards that had springs on the wheels, and he says, I want to go up to Salvador or something up there, and he liked to go down these steep hills. Okay, I'll give it a go. So we go up the top of this hill, and he said it's very important that when you carve your first turn that you go perpendicular on the street, because it is so steep that if you draw your turn out a little bit too subtle, number one, you'll hit a little sand berm right in the middle of the street and you'll slide out. Or number two, you'll have to make a second turn, and then you're going so fast you can't get off. Watch me. So there he goes. He makes a perfect turn, another perfect turn. I go, well, this can't be that bad. We're in our 40s. We're in good shape. So I made the first turn and then strung out the second turn. Next thing you know, there's no way I can make a turn. I'm going straight down the hill. I'm going 25 miles an hour. So I have 2 choices. I jump off on the street and do a face plant, or going down, I'm looking for a bush to crash into, which is what I did. So I just ran the skateboard right into the curb and dove into the bush and came out a little scratched. And Tim is laughing like hell. He said, come on, let's do this again. Okay. So we did, with the exact same outcome. We came home, I walked in the house and Terry took one look at me and I looked like I'd been drug under a chariot. I was a mess. He said, what happened? Oh, Tim goes, we went skateboarding. We had a great time. Okay, then Tim goes, he says, a year or 2 later, he says, I signed you up for a poker tournament. Texas Hold'em, $50 buy-in. There'd be 15, 18 guys there. It's a nice payoff. I'm thinking, terrific, it sounds fun. We show up Forester Ranch about 12 o'clock on a Saturday. I caught some really good hands. They split Tim and I up. Okay, so it's a process of elimination. By 2 a.m. Sunday morning, I'm looking across the table at, because that never changed. He could have 4 aces or nothing, but that was the same expression Tim had on his face the whole damn day. No one could read him. They couldn't read him. So Tim won, and he gave me a ride home, and I was so thankful. That was a wonderful deal. And the last one, Tim and I were always talking about sports fans. Tim was a big Notre Dame football fan, as you know. He loves sports, and he and I would discuss women versus men and who was the most passionate about sports. And so he told me a story. He said, once upon a time there was a guy that came into the Super Bowl, and he walked in, he sat down, he had 50-yard line seats. And he sat down, he had his large beer, his popcorn, and he sat down there, and he was drinking his beer, and the game's kind of ramping up. And he said the crowd started filling in, and the seat next to him was empty. And the man on this side of him went, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Excuse me, sir." He said, I noticed the seat on your left is empty. And he said, well, I bought that for my wife. And he went, "Oh, yeah. Oh, is she in the restroom or something?" He said, "No, she passed away." He went, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." So the game's getting ready for kickoff, and it's crowded and everything, and the seat's still empty. He tapped him on the shoulder again. He said, "Excuse me, sir, that's a really expensive seat. Maybe you could have given it to some friends or family." He says, "Oh, I think they're all at her funeral." Tim had the best sense of humor. I'm going to miss him so much. He was just the best. We all love him. Anyway, thank you guys.
Tracy, I'm Timbo's niece. Sorry about the speaker thing. To be fair, it's the only way to get purse attention sometimes. But it's funny listening to all of these stories from all of the Westfalls and Marshalls. And, we've grown up knowing you, but also knowing stories of you more so. And some of these are really nice because it kind of dawned on me. I was like, so many of these stories really sound so similar to mine and my cousin's stories. They're so similar, and I realized that's not on accident. They grew up going to T Street and the Hole together. That's why we went to the Hole every time the Westfalls came every summer. It was the exact same thing. And I guess I don't know, it just didn't dawn on me or whatever. But it's just so nice that relationship with all of you cousins really, really just solidified our relationship as well. And honestly, kind of in the same way with the Westfalls, we grew up in Los Angeles, and so we would come down, several times, but we didn't grow up in San Clemente. And so coming to San Clemente felt like a vacation. We would spend all day at the beach, and we would use the hose to wash off. We'd go into Grandma's house because she still would not let us in, obviously. But we had such a strong bond, and I really, really think that that's because of the strong bond that the Perts and the Marshalls had, that they knew how important that was, and that distance really did not matter. And really, the kind of main thing I wanted to say was Uncle Timbo, I guess I'm not speaking for anyone, but I guess on behalf of the cousins, I don't think anyone would disagree that he was such a father figure to all of us. It did not matter the age, the distance, anything that is. Uncle Timbo and Aunt Mam took it upon themselves. They were at everything. And again, like I said, I grew up not in town. They were at every play, every graduation, some soccer games. It was amazing. The time that they took, it didn't even feel like they lived an hour and a half away, but we were always with them. Actually, when I graduated from college in New Orleans, which is just an allergy in itself, he clearly could not come to New Orleans, and he called me and apologized for not being able to come to my college graduation. I was like, well, you get one pass. You've been to literally everything else in the last 22 years, so I think it's fine. But just that kind of thing, he always let us know how proud of us he was, how much he loved us, and really like such an amazing figure in our lives. And even the silly stuff, like we would be at Grandma's house and he would just pull out a pint of ice cream and everyone's like, yep, Tim eats a pint of ice cream every night. Like that was a normal thing to say. And everyone was totally like fine with it. We were like, wait, I have questions about that, but it was just Timbo, you know, like it was really just anything he did was so joyful and so loving to all of us. And I got to hear all these stories from my mom and from all of you, and it's just so nice to, I mean, really, that's why I like doing these slideshows, is because I see all of these pictures, I get to ask all of the questions. I have a lot of questions about some of those pictures, but I get to hear these stories and I get to see them and I get to relive them over and over, and you guys get to see 4 seconds of a picture. Like I really feel like I get to enjoy that moment. And so yeah, I obviously this is super tough for all of us, really tough for the cousins because it really is, you know, a father figure. But you know, people talk about his laugh and his smile. I can like feel his hug, if that makes sense. He had the best hug, just the biggest, tightest hug he would ever give. And really not only, but kind of the main memory that I have is, I guess it's more of a combination of memories, but anytime I would walk into Grandma's house, Tim would be standing in the kitchen, and he would just turn, he would go, hey Gracie Pie, and just like yell into the door every time. He would like see me in the window, like he was far away, and he would always, by the second I was in the door, he would go, hey Gracie Pie, like come on over, you know, come have, you know, whatever he was making. And obviously that sticks with me a lot. And so now, you know, with all of this, you know, it's hard not to think of our mom as well. My mom was Ann Pert Palmer. She was the 6th of the 9. And they were really, really close. They worked together, as John Giza said. But all I can think about, just kind of like that, you know, moment, all I can think about is Tim getting up to heaven and walking in and just going, hey, Andy, how's it going? And only person that ever called her that. I can just hear him going, hey, Andy, like, give me a big hug. You know, it's been too long. So that makes me really happy, and I'm so happy all this could happen, and I just love you all.
Hi there, my name's Renee Bondi, and I want to give you a little bit of backstory to a little small thing that you may not know of Tim's extra kindness on the little things. The backstory is that the Mission San Juan was my home for 50 years. That's where I went to church, that's where I worked for a long time. And when I turned 50, when Mike and I turned 50, we thought, you know what, we need different piece of food on the menu. And that's when we decided to go to Holy Trinity in Ladera, where we were this morning. And I realized, even though we were so involved with the mission, I couldn't really feel like I could jump into Holy Trinity, because quite frankly, after being 50 years at the mission, every time I went to Holy Trinity, I felt like I was having an affair. That I can't be at a different church. It just felt so wrong. And so I didn't really jump into service there at all. We went, and the pastor, Father Roland, who was there this morning, was a personal friend, but still I just felt like I shouldn't jump in full time. And so I didn't for a few years. And then our son at that time was somewhere in his early 20s, and he started as a side job in college, was started to sing, play guitar, and sing at San Juan Hills Golf Course. And I remember being there one Sunday afternoon while he was just singing, and looking over, and there was Tim and Pam. I thought, wait, I recognize them. Oh, that's that nice couple from Trinity. But I never really got to know people at Trinity because I was having an affair. Mike and I couldn't jump into this church. And so I didn't get a chance to really get to know people. I didn't let myself get to know people. Somehow I felt that way for a while. And then one thing led to another. We spoke, Pam, a couple times at the golf course, and you guys were so sweet to be there to listen to Daniel. And they'd gotten to know our son Daniel when he sang at times at Trinity. And so they were just like all the nieces and nephews were talking about. They were, Pam and Tim were so good about getting those young people and just, how are you and what are you doing? And really caring about them. Daniel felt that way about the two of you. And so then the Lord just plopped in my lap a teaching job. And so for those of you that know, but years ago before I broke my neck, I was the choir teacher at San Clemente High. And so my first love really, really is classroom teaching, always has been. And I broke my neck and not able to do that. And so all of a sudden, about 7 years ago, or 7 years ago, a teaching job landed in my lap. Could not believe that the Lord was bringing me full circle back into the classroom. I just, what? And finally I went, oh man, okay, let's do this. I see what you're talking about. Well, I can't drive. It's something that would really be scary for all of you that saw me the wheel. And so I remember sitting with some friends and saying, should I take this job? My husband Mike was working full time. How in the world? I knew that I could get to work with my caregiver in the morning, but how was I going to get home? I didn't want Mike to feel like he always had to get off early to come drive me home. Our son was off to college. He couldn't help. I thought, oh gosh, do I take this job? How am I going to make it work? And my friend said, we'll get some friends and they'll sign up and drive you home. And once a month, they'll sign up once a month to drive you home. They'll show up at 5:30 and in your wheelchair accessible van, drive you home. I went, oh my gosh, is that too much to ask? All these things. And then somehow, I still don't know exactly how, Pam, you got enlisted to input onto Sign Up Genius, this software program, for people to sign up to volunteer to drive Renee home Monday through Friday, 5:30. And so that started happening. Pam was inputting these dates and these times. Thank you. Publicly say thank you to you, Pam, for doing that, because truly I would not have gone back into the classroom. And you did that for 5 years or however long you did that. Every month I'd give her dates and she'd fill it in and send it out to this wonderful group of people. Well, one day, Tim's name showed up on the sign up. Now this was kind of a girly girl thing that it was more my girlfriends that did this, right? Amanda just stopped. I went, oh my goodness, it's Pam's husband, Tim. How nice. I really didn't know Tim very well, but I'll never forget the first day he walked in, and he'd sign up about once a month, I think, or so, to drive me home, and he'd show up 5:30 in my wheelchair accessible van, so they always had to come to my house in San Capistrano, sneak in, let our dog go through our dog, barking, whoever this person's coming into our house, pick up my van, drive me to the Mission Basilica School in San Juan, and he'd walk into my classroom at 5:30, walk into the classroom, and he'd say, hey, Renee, and I'm like, oh, Tim, thank you for doing this, and okay, what do you need? And I said, well, can you pick up these papers, can you do this? And he'd help pack me up, he'd put all my chairs back in a row, because kids are messy and things move around. And by the time I left, all 3 rows and were perfectly in alignment, and everything was all picked up. And he goes, anything else? And I said, no, I think that's good. And then he packed up, and he'd pick up my book bag, and if I needed to, if I was cold, he put my shawl around me to keep me warm, and then I'd be rolling out next to him, and we'd be walking out to the van, and he always had a great sense of when I was too tired to talk. Because a teacher, blah, 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 right? Constant, and especially as a choir teacher, right? And he was always so sensitive and so kind to me being as comfortable as possible. Then, of course, we get in the car, and I ask about Tim, and you have to remember, he was working full-time. This was not, he wasn't one of those retirees that was doing it. He was working full-time, and he still would sign up to come drive me. We'd get home, and oftentimes my mother, who was in her early 90s at the time, would be at our house, and he would take the time. Again, he'd work a long day that day. He'd take the time before leaving to sit down with my 97-year-old mom and say, Marie, you look beautiful today. How are you? And he would sit and spend time with my mom who's now home with the Lord, but was so, so sweet. And then he turned to me, he'd say, anything else you need before I go? I said, no, I'm good. And he'd give me a hug and he'd be on his way. And it was just this behind-the-scenes kindness of this man. And very much behind the scenes, but so important. So I think of a phrase for him, definitely servant's heart, and definitely when I think of Tim Pert, I think of kindness. So thank you, Tim. We are going to miss you, and I cannot wait to be dancing with you one day up on the jitterbug floor. So anyway, thank you, Pam, for letting me be a part of it.